Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 174. It's Wednesday, the 14th of November, coming straight at you out of Melbourne, Australia. Fresh from our trip to New York, UFC 230. Had so much fun. Welcome back to Submission Radio to all of our listeners. It's been a little bit of time since the last episode, Cass, but it just feels so good to be back here once again.
Does it? I mean, Knicks versus Bulls in Madison Square Garden, UFC 230, Mike Rappaport's house. Who did we see at the hockey? Doesn't matter. It was a great game. Running into Jimmy
and the Penguins,
Carr.
double overtime into penalty shootout.
And we got double overtime at the Chicago Bulls and New York Knicks game. Crazy time. Running into Jimmy Carr in the Comedy Cellar.
Wild. We
all
also
the people.
did Late Night with Seth Meyers on election night, just randomly picked from the street. Unbelievable.
I don't know if
Comedy
it's good to be back in Melbourne. I'm feeling a little bit sad now. It's great to be back in Melbourne. Love Melbourne. Voted the most livable city in the world like a million times in a row. So it's always good to be back in Melbourne. And with a sexy lineup, right?
Very sexy. Very sexy lineup. I mean, before we get into that lineup, just want to say, Cass, we were staying in New Jersey, in New York, and we had an absolutely wonderful time in New Jersey. But whenever you're out of home, I don't know what it's like for everybody that's living in America. I don't know what it's like for everybody that lives in Australia. But after a little while, you start noticing little things here and there, and you go, man, when I go back to Melbourne, I'm going to enjoy this. And there are a couple of things I enjoyed in Melbourne that I couldn't enjoy in New York, Cass. A couple of things.
Oh, really?
This is just like little things. Sushi. I love sushi. There's obviously heaps of sushi in New York, but what did we eat? Pizza slices and different things like that. So sushi was a welcome relief to me here in Melbourne. No garbage on the street. Nothing against New York. Love New York, but I was literally trying to get out of a car and a big garbage bag was stopping me from getting out of my car there when we were trying to get to a restaurant when we were over there. So all that kind of stuff. And just quickly, as we wrap up the New York talk, a big thank you to everybody for supporting us over there. Again, a lot of kind words on social media about our coverage over in New York. It was a lot of fun and a lot of highlights like Jimmy Carr doing the big games. Luke Thomas, a big thank you to him for having us on his show over there at Sirius and also having us over at the MMA Hour, having us visit there. It was fantastic. And all the media people like Oscar Willis, Sandu, a whole bunch of guys over there. Ken, the whole team over there, absolutely amazing. But one of the interviews that I really enjoyed, one of the guys that was really, really cool to us was Michael Rappaport, the actor, the man behind the I'm Rappaport Stereo podcast. And if you guys have not checked out, we do have a sit-down interview with him in his apartment in New York, which was a crazy experience all in its own right, up on the YouTube channel right now. And that was an unbelievable experience as well. So all in all, a crazy trip. And thank you to everybody for helping us get there.
Don't forget thanking Marissa Rives, a New Jersey local, New Jersey native, the producer for the Luke Thomas show, a bit of an unsung hero, took us out, showed us around New Jersey. A great tapas place. Phenomenal. Amazing. Treated us better than we deserve.
The guy kept trying to take the food, and I kept looking at him like, man, I'm dipping this bread into the sauce, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. It was unbelievable. Another thing about New York, a lot of the toilets, just one toilet.
Too high as well, right?
Too high, but not multiple booths or toilets. So they've gone from the let's fit as many toilets as we can into here to the let's put one toilet and turn it like into a living room type situation where you can just sit there on your phone for hours on end, which it's difficult for people who need to go to the toilet. This was in restaurant places.
Gotta say.
No, Marissa, absolutely fantastic. Took her and her wonderful partner took us around New Jersey, took us to the beautiful viewing area for the city, beautiful landscape, and some of the best food we had. So absolutely wonderful. And she's killing it over there at Sirius. She's doing a bunch of shows. And the stuff that she's done with Luke over there is pretty evident to all MMA fans. They're absolutely killing it. So a big thank you to them as well.
Yeah. If you haven't come to Australia, just come for the toilets. You will be in heaven. You don't know what you're missing out.
There's no gap in the doors, man. There's no gap.
The gaps in the doors in New York toilets. My God. I feel like
I don't know if I should wait behind the door, if I'm breaking some kind of law.
Yeah.
Because I want to see if the thing's done. There's also the other thing where in the airports, if a door, like, you got to wait, like all the doors are closed and only when it's open is when the toilet is free, which is different to over here, whereas the doors may be closed and then you got to check whether or not it's occupied or not. So like you walk up to a closed door, people are looking at you like, what the hell are you doing? When the door's open, the toilet's free. If the door's closed, it's not there. So a lot of, we almost got arrested a number of times for being perverts. It was great.
The gaps in the doors, it's like a voyeur's paradise. It's just not, I don't like that when I'm in. And here in Australia, the toilet paper never dips in the bowl, whereas in America, it's like a minute by minute occurrence. I'm just saying, America.
You get a bit of splashback as well. Look, there's nothing wrong with it, but it was a different experience for us when we went to the toilet, which is like 80% of the day for me, because you got to get on that social media somewhere, and the toilet is usually the best place I like to do it. That's where the best tweets, Instagrams, Facebooks happen for Submission Radio. And then quickly, as we do mention people to thank for the trip, I just want to bring up Musashi real quick, Cass. Musashi got us over for UFC 230. They're our sponsor. Unbelievable protein supplement brand. They have a bunch of great products that we love over here at Submission Radio. I mean, you guys can look on our social media and see Casper destroying a box of the protein bars on the way to New York. I mean, the bars
on the daily.
I'm telling you right now, I'm a bit of a sweet tooth. I like my Snickers. Their peanut butter bars are absolutely unbelievable. They're delicious. They taste better than going out there and getting something that's terrible for you, and great for you. Has a lot of protein in it, low in sugar, fantastic in between gym snacks. I'm taking a bunch with me. I also want to mention these delicious protein wafers that they have, Cass. 12 grams of protein, low in sugar, and a great time. Something you can pack into your bag as you go to work and take with you. Wow. Again, Musashi, absolutely unbelievable, supporting us. They support guys like Robert Whittaker, and the big announcement, they'll be supporting us going into UFC Adelaide, which happens at the end of this month, the beginning of next month. So look out for more Musashi here on Submission Radio. And just quickly, for everybody out there, jump on musashi.com.au, go on the Be My Protein calculator, figure out what you need, and then I'm telling you again, me and Cass, we've tasted all the proteins that you can imagine. We grew up in that sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger phase in Australia where everybody was trying to get huge, so we were tasting all of them, and this is some of the best tasting. Well, not some of. This is the best tasting protein out there, so make sure to check them out.
It's delicious.
Cass, I feel like people have been sitting on the edge of their seats trying to figure out what kind of lineup does Submission Radio have for their big return show, but we wouldn't put big in front of that sentence if it wasn't something special.
Yeah, that's right. We got a sexy lineup. We got Mike Perry, the man himself, joining us on the program, fresh off his fight against Cowboy Cerrone at UFC Denver. Got a lot of questions for the man, including how's his arm? How's his arm? How's it feeling? Obviously, in that brutal armbar against Cowboy Cerrone, how's he feeling after the fight? What did he learn? Where does his future lie? Is he going back to Jackson Winkeljohn's? A lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns there. So obviously, Mike Perry, that's going to be a fun one. I've got Coach Wink, the other side of this equation. Obviously, there's been some interesting messages flying around. If you've been on Reddit between some of the coaches, got to ask the man what he thinks. Also on that Mike Perry fight, we've got John Jones coming back. There's a lot of things to touch on with Coach Wink. Also, Kevin Lee. It's been a little while since we've had Kevin Lee on the program, but he's fighting Al Iaquinta at UFC Milwaukee, so we got to get him on the program to talk about a whole bunch of things. Last time we saw him, we were at a vodka party at UFC 229. I was going to say, I'm sure he remembers that, but depending on how his night played out, he may not. So we might need to remind him, maybe reminisce about UFC 229. And it's always fun having Kevin Lee on the program. So that's going to be a fun one. And of course, Dave Meltzer to look back on the history of the UFC, talk about reminiscing there. 25 years, go back all the way to UFC 1, talk about UFC Denver, talk about potentially the UFC shutting down the 125-pound men's division. There's a lot to talk about, and it's going to be a sexy show.
Yeah, there's heaps to talk about. I want to find out when he first met Dana White and sort of the transition there as well, because so much fascinating stuff. Dave Meltzer, by the way, just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to a number of things. So it just feels so appropriate to have him on this program, to have all these great guests on the program. It's going to be a lot of fun, Cass. Before we go to our first guest, just a quick reminder to leave us an iTunes review. If you enjoy the program, leave us an iTunes review. I know we promise every other week to read the reviews, but we will do it. We will do it. It'll be next week. So leave a review. This is a great time to do it. We read them all personally. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, we're all on there. Check us out. Give us a like. Give us a follow. And give us a comment. Give us your thoughts on the show. Slide into our DMs. Everything is open. Sometimes it's funny with those DMs. You leave them open, and then it sends you like a request for someone to send you a message, and we miss those from time to time. As a matter of fact, sometimes we get people contacting us from major TV shows and stuff like that through there, and we don't see it till months later, and like, oh, that would have been great if we did that. I wonder what Submission Radio would have been like if we accepted that request. But anyway, jump on there, and if we don't respond, maybe jump on Facebook or Twitter and message us through there, because it could be the fact that we just didn't get a chance to see it. But
or just come to our houses. If we're sleeping, just wake us up. Be like, hey, read my goddamn message, and then we will.
That's right. Yeah. Literally just wake us up, tell us about the message, and leave. And then we will go on and check the message out in the middle of the night. It would be our pleasure. Cass, you mentioned it. It's a big, sexy show of Submission Radio. We have a first guest on the line, and I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is one of the most fun guys in the UFC's welterweight division. He fought this past weekend at the UFC's 25th anniversary show in Denver, and he's kind enough to give us some of his time today. Platinum Mike Perry, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you today, man?
Yo, I'm doing good, bro. Chilling, eating a delicious steak and lobster.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, the dieting and getting ready for the fight can be brutal sometimes. What's it feel like to be able to relax a little bit and enjoy some nice food and just to sort of let your hair down a little bit?
Well, the problem is I'm so eager off of that loss, getting armbar, getting finished for my first time. So eager, I feel like my brain is moving a million miles an hour, and I could be collecting a bunch of information. So I want to get in the gym, but it's got x-rays on my arm, and they x-rayed my wrist, my hand, and my forearm. And I'm like, yo, you need to do my elbow. So I don't even know if the x-rays are going to show anything. We're waiting to get MRI on Thursday night anyway. So, you know, my shit is broke, but it's broken like a different type of way.
So did you get any results from the x-rays already? Did they do the elbow, and did they come up with anything?
No, they didn't do the elbow. That's what I was saying.
Oh.
They did my wrist, my hand, my forearm. I'm like, why you ain't do the elbow?
How's it feeling right now, Mike? I mean, you know your body better than anyone else. Do you think it's a bad break around that elbow area?
It could be anything. I can't move my arm fast.
Yep.
So it's tendons, ligaments, and muscles, but I don't know if the elbow chipped or anything like that.
But from the sounds of it, you basically you're already keen to get back in training, right?
I'd love to. I'm ready to go do some jiu-jitsu.
Well, yeah, you posted a video of GSP on Instagram. Just tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind doing that, and for everybody who hasn't seen it just yet.
Well, it's Matt Hughes armbarring him. I don't know what round, and Matt Hughes did it from the top position. Swung around. I'm actually really good at that armbar. I was also doing an interview yesterday, and I told someone I felt like Cowboy Cerrone did something to me that I was never going to do to him, and that made me susceptible to getting armbarred. I was never going to attack him with an armbar. Even though I went for a key lock, I was really just looking for a position to punch him in the face. And, you know, with offensive ground and pound or whatever, jiu-jitsu is a great counter to that. And I have to be sharp in countering jiu-jitsu with jiu-jitsu, and I wasn't ready to roll around and shoot an armbar on him. So that's all I got to focus on, man. I used to be so good at jiu-jitsu, and I still am. I need to drill it consistently the way that I drill my mitts in kickboxing, and then I'll be unstoppable.
I feel like this sort of loss, kind of like with the GSP loss where he lost to Matt Hughes and then he came back and he went on a massive tear. Do you feel like that could sort of be the same situation for you, where because it happened, you've learned from it, and now you can come back a lot stronger?
Absolutely. I learned so much. Rolling around with Cerrone in that octagon, my mind was wide awake. I was absorbing everything, every second of it. And I learned more in that 4.5 minutes than I've learned my entire career.
Wow.
I mean, going into that fight, there was all the talk about camps, this, and you and Cerrone, that. In hindsight, did that have any effect on you going into the fight? And was it weird at the end of the day fighting a guy like Cowboy, a guy that you liked so much?
No, I was fully open to just fighting the fight. I think that's what happened, and that's why I got caught. because I got into an MMA fight, and I was willing to just. We were both being so smart. We were both being so as perfect as we could. Neither one wanted to let the other get the upper hand at any second. He was giving me trouble hitting him on the outside, so we kept ending up in the clinch in the middle. Just working those knees were the only shots we had. We were holding on to each other's arms so we couldn't get elbows in the clinch. Once I went for the collar tie, and he exited quickly. Smart on his part. I should have exited the ground. In another world, in a perfect platinum world, I slammed him on his head and knocked him unconscious, but that's not what happened. I slammed him, broke my arm, and he broke it about 6 more ways. I had to tap. I mean, that video on my Instagram of GSP, he tapped. I wonder how many ligaments and things he got pulled in that time, as he tapped rather quick. Keep that, please. Yeah, please. Fuck, my phone is fucking sitting on it. Why are you gonna take it from me?
So they're trying to take your food and your phone at the same time.
Yeah, he was trying to take it. But I was just saying how GSP, you know, it seemed like he tapped kind of quick, but he didn't. I get it. It hurt. It must have been hurt right away for him. And I slammed Cerrone and snapped it myself once first, and then he went belly down. It's a much stronger armbar as well. And from a black belt to a purple belt, I made a purple belt mistake. That's what I did. It might have been a white belt mistake, you know what I mean? Because I wasn't flowing and in my technique the way that I was with my kickboxing. I went for the takedown because it was what was open. We were constantly countering each other on the feet, and I got the body lock, and it just made sense to grab that takedown. Now there are things I have to work from there if I'm going to be taking people down. Watch me start Khabibing these motherfuckers, and then they're going to be like, oh, we can't let Perry take us down. Then they're going to stand with me, and I'm going to KO everybody.
What were the moments like in the back after the fight? Did you get a chance to speak to Cowboy, and what did you guys say to each other?
Yeah, I walked up to him, and I saw him in the back. I said, thanks for the opportunity. This is not in the cage. In the cage, I told him, good job. He asked like an asshole, did it break? I said, yeah, motherfucker, you heard it pop. And then his boys came in there, and they was like, oh, we want all the smoke. And my boy Frank the Tank was ready to fight all they ass. And I had to be like, hey, bro, just chill.
What do you mean they wanted all the smoke? They wanted an altercation in the cage?
Yeah, they were acting like they wanted to fight in the cage because the big lion that Jackson Wink brought with him I was maimed. My arm was no good. I couldn't have fought with that arm. It was what I say on my Instagram, out of commission.
Yeah.
So I had one arm. That makes the monster a lot weaker. So that's kind of the sport that we're in. And then in the back, I saw him with that jacket on. I was like, hey, man, that really is a nice jacket. I want to thank you for the opportunity, though. I thanked him, and he said, hey, man, you put the fire back in me. So I got a good Donald Cerrone. I think we were the best 2 fighters on the planet that night. We got into a fight, and I got armbarred. I mean, GSP got armbarred. Anthony Pettis won the world title on Benson Henderson, who was a grappling machine, fanatic, fucking amazing athlete. So that armbar was actually, you know, you go through this circle of basics and advanced moves, and then it always goes back to the basics. So we went full circle a couple times in that fight, and then I ran into an armbar.
For sure. And it was a great fight, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that. You said on Instagram, speaking of Instagram and the GSP post, you mentioned also on Instagram that Dana White was disappointed in you. What did you mean by that? What did he say to you?
No, he didn't say anything to me. It was just him in the picture in the background.
Okay.
And, you know, the face that he was making.
Yeah.
I was really just I was trying to let him know And I was trying to let him know that I'm disappointed in myself and that I will do better. And if he didn't see it at that moment, he will see it.
Well, I think you've got a great attitude. Go on.
Well, yeah, thank you, man. I mean, I feel like, listen, I'm going to say something here, and it's going to sound crazy, and I'm not going to take nothing away from Cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
He won fair and square. But I felt like I was staring defeat in the face that night. I felt like, okay, if it had gone the other way, they would have been like, oh, Cowboy had all the pressure. But me, I was fighting a fight that wasn't my fight. It was Jackson Wink versus Cowboy Cerrone. So it was my coaching that took my body over. There was something, the way that we trained, that I was ending up with takedowns on people. And then their jiu-jitsu wasn't the level of Cowboy Cerrone to counter me. So I think I stared defeat in the face that night, and I got in the cage anyways. I felt like I was going to lose before I ever walked in. Maybe that's just because I lost now. But I just felt like everything was against me. And it was just to make me stronger. I felt like I learned more from that loss than I would have ever learned from a win. And that's it, man. I was looking at the Grim Reaper, and I entered the cage with him. I brought the real Cowboy Cerrone. We were the best two fighters on the planet when we were in that cage, period. That's how it was. We were the best. And the experience won in the grappling. The jiu-jitsu is amazing, and I already knew that. I just got away from it.
So I just want to clarify, Mike, because you mentioned sort of, some of the training and Jackson Winkeljohn, you feel like it kind of led you to the way the fight played out. Will you continue to train at Jackson Winkeljohn for your next fight and for the future?
I like Frank the Tank.
Wherever
he's at, that's where I'm trying to work my kickboxing. He's at Jackson Wink. I love to come to Jackson Wink. I'm willing to help the people there as much as I can so I can get some help. But I'm also going back to Florida. My coach, Julian Williams from Florida, was a part of that fight. He was in the corner with me, Frank the Tank, and Coach Wink. But I didn't do all my jiu-jitsu with him and Jacare Souza. I'm going back to Florida to do that. And then the way that I worked with Julian last camp, not that much, like a week here and a couple days there. That's how I'm going to work with Frank the Tank, keeping my mitts tight. I know what I fixed. I know what needed to be fixed. I came out here and fixed it. It was my back leg needed to bend. My hands and shoulders needed to come up to protect my chin. And I needed to bounce around like a little butterfly. I came out and I did that. But Frank the Tank will still be a part of my team. And I got Julian Williams, and I'm looking for – I don't know who the third person that's going to fill that spot yet is. I mean, if it has to be Winkeljohn, because it seems like the big gyms run parts of the UFC. It seems like the UFC wants the big gyms to fight the big gyms. So whoever that is, that's my key in. I'm not the key yet. One day I will be. One day everyone will know about Platinum Martial Arts, but I got to make my stamp first.
It's interesting that you mentioned Frank the Tank, but not so much Coach Wink. Why sort of the hesitation to have him as the third person?
We just don't click like that. I want to be around Frank the Tank. I want to be around Julian Williams. Being around Coach Wink, I'm like, I like him. He's a great guy, but he knows that we didn't click like that. We didn't spend tremendous amounts of time together learning from one another.
Mm. It's interesting that you mentioned to us, Mike, that you don't feel like you've sort of got enough pull in the UFC. I feel like a lot of people believe you're a big draw, and I think, big matchups are your future. Why do you feel like you need to sort of be with a big camp to get the big matchups at the moment? Because I believe a lot of fans believe you're at that level where you could sort of have some of the biggest fights in the division.
Absolutely. I believe I can beat any given man on any given night. It's just we were missing something in our game plan. I like how it worked out, but I know what Julian brings to the table. I know what Frank the Tank brings to the table. I feel like my manager is a good third cornerman just because he does the most as far as advertising me and like getting me bigger paychecks and things like that. So I haven't found a truly valuable third person yet. I know that the value that Frank the Tank and Julian Williams gives me is tremendous. And I haven't found someone to match that third spot. Why do you think Danielle Nickerson used to be in my corner? Because she did so many things that helped me out and took pressure off of me for fight week. She made it easy for me to make it to the cage.
Do you feel like that was maybe missing a little bit going into this fight from the camp that you were in?
No. Well, yes, because look, the game plan. I didn't do what the coaches expected me to do, because that was a miscommunication in what we were doing. Obviously, when they saw me go for the takedown, my corner was quiet. They were like, "Oh shit, what's he doing? He needs to get up and make him fight him." I just saw the point and wanted to take the round, and I just need to work that position, those positions on top. I'll be unstoppable.
So I guess it's going to be interesting to see.
Listen,
Sorry, go on.
Check me out here. No, it's all good, man. Listen, I believe we got some good stuff. It was a real pleasure talking to you guys, especially being Australians. I got a lot of Australian friends these days, man. Shout out Jackson O'Doherty and my boy Aaron McConnell. But I just finished my lunch. I'm going to pay. I'm going to get out of this restaurant, man. Finish my last couple oysters and my cider, my little beer here. So I appreciate you guys talking to me about the fight. And, you know what I'm saying, just wait for the return, man. Platinum Perry's going to come back ferociously, and I'm going to be the best version again. I always get better. Everybody sees that every time.
As we let you go, Mike, just timeline. When do you think that might be? I know the fight is fresh, but when do you think we can see you back in the octagon?
As soon as possible. I mean, I can't even really throw a jab right now. My arm can't make that twisting rotation. So it hurts my elbow, too bad to twist it and throw a snapping punch. When I can grapple and throw a snapping punch, it's probably going to be a month at least before I can really do that.
All right.
So,
we'll be waiting, man. We can't wait. We'll let you go in the meantime. We'll let you enjoy the last of those oysters, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, guys. Don't forget to follow the man on Instagram at Platinum Mike Perry. That is where all the fun stuff is. And, of course, on Twitter at Platinum Perry. Mike, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
peace.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys. Well, this is always a special pleasure. A guy that you recognize from many of our show lineups returns to the program. He's a coach behind such MMA royalty as John Jones, Holly Holm, Michelle Waterson, Carlos Condit, and many others. Coach Mike Winkeljohn, welcome back to Submission Radio. It's good to have you back on the show today. How are you, man?
Dan, Catherine, thanks for having me, man. I'm doing good. Thanks.
Always a pleasure. So let's just kick things off. Was obviously one of the craziest things we've seen in a long time in MMA. Yair Rodriguez, a guy who spent significant time on the Jackson Wink mats over the years, delivered an insane buzzer-beating elbow knockout of a Korean Zombie this past weekend. Got to get your thoughts, man. Where were you, and what was your reaction when you saw that happen in real time?
I was watching it live, and I couldn't actually. I was in the back, so I saw it on screen, so I had a good view.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, honestly. I couldn't believe it. It's incredible. I think it'll go down on one of those highlight films forever. You know, one of the craziest knockouts ever in history.
I mean, given that it was UFC's 25th anniversary show, could you think of a more perfect way to end a main event than that?
It didn't work out that well for the Korean Zombie, but it was pretty neat. You know what? Last second, you know, duck your head and throw your elbow up and hope you're hitting something, and he did. So that's as creative as it comes.
I mean, you mentioned it's going to go down as one of the best. Do you think it could be number one? I know in 25 years there's a lot of knockouts, and if we're including Pride and everything else, there's a lot of knockouts. But do you think this could be number one just because of the sheer creativity, the fact that it was in the last second of the last round? What do you think about that?
I don't know if it go down as the best. I'm not sure. You know, they look like their life got taken out of them. But for sure, probably the most creative thing I've ever seen. So it's definitely up there. But Yair, you know, even when he would come in the gym, he was just so creative. He'd come up with all kinds of things. People would be trying to figure out how he's kicking him at the angles he was kicking him sometimes. Very smart young man as well.
Do he ever shock you? Because you're a former world champion. You're a man who knows striking very, very well. Very, you know elbows very well. Did he ever shock you in training, sort of see things that kind of surprised you a bit?
Oh, yeah. You know, sometimes we kind of like get going on a miss. And in the past, when he was at the gym, he would throw combinations, and out of the blue, he would throw extra things that I would totally not expect, which is kind of scary, especially because your normal fighting instinct is almost opposite of actually catching punches with mitts. And so sometimes your heart beats a little faster, and you get that little fear of like, oh, crap, I almost went the wrong way. But he's that kid who comes up with some very neat things. And actually, I think I've learned a lot from over the years just kind of watching him in the gym as well as in the fight. He comes up with some really neat things.
We had Mike Perry on the show a little bit earlier, and he was talking about the co-main against Donald Cerrone. What were your thoughts on that fight and the way it played out?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. I never said Donald Cerrone wasn't a fantastic fighter. There's no doubt about that. You know, it is what it is. Mike is just such a tough fighter. He just went, well, you know, I think I'll take the guy down and ground and pound him. I would have rather not been there, of course, but it played out that way. And honestly, I mean, it sucks for Mike and for all of us they lost. But with that being said, he will learn from this thing. He's going to go back. He's going to work his submission defense. He's going to learn about making the proper decisions in a fight. Because you need to be there. You know, he put himself there. And I think with proper decisions, he has a good future.
Well, I mean, we spoke to him before, and he's basically super keen to work on his jiu-jitsu. He's definitely not defeated by this loss. Do you think we sort of missed out on a lot of his, I guess, improvements at Jackson Wink that he's made at the gym because the fight went to the ground so quickly? And do you feel, I guess, given the lead up to this fight, there was a bit more on the line, maybe a bit more, I guess, pressure for sort of Mike to perform, you know, and I guess do it for the team in a sense?
Well, you know, there's always pressure on a fight. At the end of the day, it's not about winning and losing. I mean, it's a zero-sum game, and you know, it was going to be Perry or Cowboy came out. Cowboy came out. He won. He definitely the better fighter that night. Absolutely. And like I said, I think that Mike will learn from it. He'll become a better fighter for it.
It was absolutely a fascinating performance. He did well on the feet. He mentioned that he had a great time at the camp, and how hands-on were you with Mike going into this fight, and what kind of stuff do you think you could work on with him directly if he does stick around that you think might be able to sort of push him to that next level in his next performance?
Oh yeah, get his butt to go to more of our group classes and roll with the guys a little bit more and work with more some submission defenses. I mean, he's got a great jiu-jitsu coach back home who trains Jacare. I mean, Julian's great. And so he gets it, but he's got to put time into it. That's it. He's missing some time in those types of situations. And we definitely worked on takedown defense, and that worked. But with that being said, it was just the wrong decision to make. And it's all my fault. I didn't stress, I guess, the situation as much as I should have. But, hey, you know what? There's absolutely no reason for you to take him down and then re-engage when you do get up. But it happens to the best. And, you know, like I said, Mike's got a great future still.
I wonder. It's interesting that you said you wish he came to sort of more of those group classes because before when we were speaking to him, he seemed a little bit, I guess, unsure of where he was going to go next. We asked him, "Are you still going to train at Jackson Winkeljohn for your next fight?" And he sort of mentioned some of the coaches that he would work with, but he didn't really say much about you, so to speak. And he was saying he's looking for a third corner person. And we said, what about Coach Wink? And he said, look, he's unsure. He feels like maybe there are some other guys that he clicks with. What did you think, I guess, about that? And how would you describe your relationship looking past sort of with Mike Perry and I guess moving forward after this one?
Oh, I think our relationship is fantastic. I think it's great. You know what? Frank Lester put a lot of time into him. I mean, he basically babysat him, was with him 24/7, and did a good job as far as getting Mike to train and getting in good shape for the fight. And he did the same thing the last camp. You know, I worked on some concepts of getting your hands up and worked on the basics that are needed to take him to the next level that he came here for. And I was trying to overall see everything as far as making sure all these little details got done. But he definitely doesn't need two striking type of guys in his corner. With that being said, he needs like an overall a game plan issue type of situation where there's some good choices out there of people that will spend a lot of time with him on those type of aspects.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question, because you, where would you categorize yourself? Are you more of a striking guy, or are you more of a sort of, I guess, overall game plan guy? Because if he's looking for a third corner man, would you say maybe, I guess there would be other choices if you're more of a striking guy?
I'm always considered more of a striking guy, but I've developed into more of an overall game planning guy and an overall guy understanding positions. And with the striking, making sure people are in the right places to not get taken down or to take their opponent down. Definitely doing really well with the clinch and stuff. But we got a guy at our gym, Joey Villasenor, who used to fight the Pride, who I think is just incredible with defending submissions on the ground and defending wrestling and taking people down with easy things. They're not so what I want to say wrestling based, they're tiring based, but use your energy well. He's understanding the game. I think Joey's a great choice for anybody. He's at our gym as well. So there's a lot of choices for Mike. Coming back, the biggest thing though really is just everybody just needs to get together and help each other out and get in there and work as a team. And Mike did that when he was there. He actually was a great sparring partner for everybody. And so we really enjoyed having Mike on the team.
Well, it's good to hear that he's obviously welcome back at the team. Now, you mentioned teamwork, and obviously there's something that we wanted to sort of get your thoughts on and sort of let you give your side, because we browsed the internets and something came up the other day. Basically, Ricky Kottenstette, who is the president of Jackson's MMA, released some pictures the other day of a conversation between him and Frank the Tank Lester, where they essentially alluded to being somewhat unhappy with, I guess, you and some of the things at the gym. They labeled, you as a bully. To be completely fair to you and give you a sort of an opportunity to respond, what did you think of that? Did that surprise you, first of all? Is this something that you sort of expected, or did it catch you off guard?
The bully thing caught me off guard, but there's no doubt I understand that Ricky wouldn't like me. Hey, you know what? Guess what? I do not like the guy. Let me think about this for a second. He ran 3 schools with Greg Jackson for a while. They all lost money. In fact, our big gym was losing money. It was considered the best gym in the world, and it was actually draining Greg Jackson's other resources. But for some reason, the manager was driving very, very nice exotic cars and living in a very nice home. Something was weird about that. So when Greg came to me and said, look, this place is failing. I'm going to have to close the doors. I said, I got an idea. I'm just not taking that guy with me, that being Ricky Kottenstette. So he's no longer allowed in our gym. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that are unhappy with me, I guess, because I guess I'm a jerk in that I expect people to show up on time, work hard, and not steal.
Okay, so fair enough. So I guess that's Ricky. What about Frank, as far as some of the things that he said? He sort of mentioned that he would, the way he sees you is that you would essentially sell him out if you had the chance. Is that something that surprised you?
Not from Frank. Frank is very volatile. He's up and down. He's basically bipolar that way. Love him to death. He's one of those guys that I gave him a second chance after we didn't want him to fight anymore because he was breaking the rules per se when he was fighting us, so he wasn't allowed to fight for us anymore. But I said, you know what, I don't give up on Frank. I want to turn you to a coach. He's actually an independent contractor where I take actually zero of the dollars he earns, working with the fighters in the gym. Unlike if you went to work for any other business, they would take a percentage. So I'm trying to help him out. So that's surprising because I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, other than give him 100% of the money people pay, which is unheard of. Everybody thinks I'm an idiot for doing that, but I give that as an opportunity for some of the fighters. So yeah, I'm a little surprised with what he said. There's no doubt about it. I've given him the opportunity to work with some of the best fighters in the world with not much experience, and yeah, there you go. But you know what? I don't know what else I can do to him other than the fact to say, hey, this is it. It's my gym, my rules, and they're not that tough. It's basically just show up on time, don't steal, and do your job. And people might think I'm crazy for that, but the choice is to become the federal government and give people welfare, and that's not what I'm all about.
Well, I was going to say, because I know in the video on Instagram you put up, you said, the gym is happier now. With this thing coming out, do you see a situation where you have a chat to Frank, and I don't know if you need to chat to Ricky, but at least have a chat to Frank and sort of square this off and make sure that the gym is sort of running at 100% and there's harmony everywhere?
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely talk to Frank. Here's the deal. Frank works with just a couple of our high-level guys, and that's about it. So, he's working his way up. I'm giving him the opportunity to work his way up. But Frank, the gym would just be floating on its own, just great. So I hope the best for him, and I hope he turns it around and decides to change his mind. But the gym's great right now. It's kind of amazing. All the crap on the internet, there's nothing really in there that's true other than the fact that everybody's in the gym every day, working out. Michelle Waterston, everybody thinks she has her own gym, but guess what? She's in our gym 3 times a day working out. She won her last fight. So don't believe everything you read. All I know is it's the team's in here working out together, and we're going forward. But what I want to talk about though is all these fights we have coming up. I mean, I got Devin Clark fighting in Toronto coming up, and Devin's looking great at light heavyweight against Rakik, and I'm a little excited about that. But the end of the year is the big one. I mean, that card, I've got John Jones coming back to win his world title. How cool is that? And he will get the title back that he never lost. On that same card, I have my kid that I think is the next John Jones. His name is Boban Lewis, fighting Uriah Hall. His very first fight in the UFC, and he gets Uriah Hall. That tells you what the UFC already thinks about him. He's something else. Another kid I think can win the world title 170 is CR the Great. I mean, CR's coming in and fighting Millander, and CR just, if you saw his last fight, it's 1-6 knockout. He's probably the most violent man I've ever met before in the cage when the door shuts, but also the most compassionate, nice man outside. Carlos Condit is got a fight on the card, and you know what? Carlos has got everything figured out ever since he had a hard fight with Robbie Lawler. And, I won't lie, he was just kind of not trying to figure out what was going on because he felt he got robbed. I felt he won that fight. I think that Carlos is back to his old self now, getting back that fire in him to just throw and be Carlos Condit. So
he's looking different in training now. You're seeing something in him, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's got that fire in him. He's coming to classes, and he's working hard with that falling off a little bit. So, man, I'm so much on Carlos' team. He's such a great guy. He's been such a legend in the sport, and he's going to end the year with us with a bang. So it's exciting to see all that happening right at the end of the year for the gym.
Yeah, I mean, so many exciting things happening, Coach. And I mean, it's great to have you on the program to get your perspective because I feel like it's important that people hear both sides of the story. Before we wrap up and we let you go, obviously very excited for these fights coming up. You mentioned something very interesting to us just before that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned that when Greg came to you, some of the gyms weren't doing very well financially, and you came in and you were able to turn them around. Just from that perspective, I mean, that's a massive, massive feat for any business person, let alone a coach, to do. How close were the gyms to sort of closing their doors, and how much work did you put in to really, make the gym what it is today? I mean, what would the sport be without Jackson Wink being open?
Oh, I don't know. I think you have to have teams. There's no doubt. I mean, the small gyms had to close because they were just definitely mismanaged. But the big gym is doing well, and I'm excited about it. I mean, I had a big conversation with Dan Lambert this last weekend about running a gym and what it's like, and I got a great relationship with Faraz and everybody else. All the gym owners, Mark Henry and AKA guys, everybody out there. It's great because you have to have teams. It's kind of like in professional football. You have the Steelers and the Cowboys, or you have the Yankees and the Sox. It's kind of neat. You have to have teams that compete against each other. There's nothing but respect. So we're glad to be included in that line, and we want to continue to be there.
I'm just curious because it's a little bit like backstage talk. What kind of stuff would you, Dan, and Faraz sort of talk? Or do you guys have like a WhatsApp group or something where everybody's putting in little things? What's the conversation look like between you guys?
Well, if I wanted to tell you that kind of stuff, I guess I would have started talking about it. But it's gym stuff, owner stuff. How to deal with fighters, different things that have happened. Those are the kind of things that I've spoken with some of the gym owners about, and you all see it all. It's all, everybody sees things through their own lens. Fighters see things their way. Coaches see things their own way. Gym owners and coaches see their things their own way. So you got to understand everybody's perspective, but it's nice to sometimes get to talk to some guys that are in your own shoes.
Mm-mm. And just before we wrap up, Coach, I mean, you've done so much for the sport. You've worked with so many fighters. We just wanted to find out, how are you doing personally? Because I know it must be hard dealing with, all this stuff on the internet, people saying all this stuff, and it started with the Cerrone stuff. Now it's progressed to these text messages. How are you going, and how have you dealt with some of the, I suppose, stuff that's coming up? Because we imagine it would be incredibly difficult to sort of hear some of this stuff from time to time from people.
Well, what's funny is I don't even look at the internet, so I don't even know what's going on. People come tell me, they come running to me to tell me, but I care less. I see it as we're very successful. People want to take us down. They're jealous of our success, and so I expect more and more of it to come in the future. I'm doing great, man. I love my job. I'm going to go in right now and work with John Jones. I'm real excited about the future, and I'm so glad I'm not doing anything else for a living.
Well, there you go, guys. Obviously, the John Jones fight. We want to have you back on the show to dedicate an entire interview just on that John Jones fight, because that is the big one. That is the big return against Alexander Gustafsson at the end of the year card. In the meantime, guys, follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at MMA Coach Wink. And it is always a pleasure and great honor to have you on the show, Coach. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
This is TJ Dillashaw, UFC champ. Listen to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is set to rematch Al Iaquinta in the main event of UFC on Fox 31 Milwaukee. The Motown Phenom himself is back on Submission Radio. Kevin Lee, welcome back to the program, man. How are you?
What's going on, my man? Always good to be here. Always.
Dude, Kevin, last time we spoke to you, we were all at a vodka party at UFC HQ ahead of UFC 229. And you were good. You were staying ready in case something didn't work out on that card. Now you're officially in the main event of UFC on Fox 31. How does it actually feel to have a date, place, and opponent finally confirmed?
It feels a lot better. You know me. I'm always thinking like a chess player, so I'm always trying to stay a couple steps ahead. So even that weekend when I was getting ready for UFC 229 and kind of seeing how everything would play out, in the back of my head, I already kind of had a plan for all the scenarios that was going to go through. And this one just happened to turn out exactly like I planned, and I can't wait. So it feels good when a plan comes together. Everything feels great. You know what I mean?
So you predicted this. You essentially saw this one coming, right?
I saw a couple different things that could have happened. This happened to be the best case scenario for me. I picked McGregor to win. And I think I did on your show too.
Yeah.
And I got to kind of eat face right there. Like he didn't show up the way that I thought he would. I'm a man. I called that one wrong, but this one is so much sweeter for me now that I get to take that O from Khabib because he still got it.
Just quickly, while we're on UFC 229, what did you think about what happened between Khabib and your nemesis Dylan Dennis on cage side? What was your reaction to that?
I thought something was going to go down that weekend. I think I even said it to you guys. Like, I'm going to keep my head down and keep moving.
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't as bad as what it could have been, especially when you're dealing with those Russians. They so emotional and these guys are such short fuse that I thought it was going to be pretty bad. With that one, it was what it was. I mean, what can you say about it? I honestly don't even know what to say about it, to be honest.
I feel like Khabib took your steam because you and Dennis were supposed to have this grappling match, and it didn't end up happening. What happened there, man? We were all excited for it.
Again, I'm a chess player. Dennis has got to work his way up now. It's levels to this game. Dennis is still, especially now that I'm gonna keep it real with you, especially now that Conor lost. It took a little bit of the motivation out of it for me. I don't really, I like a big challenge, and Conor already showed that he got out-grappled and out-dominated by Khabib. So I'm gunning after the big gun. If Dennis wants something with me, then he already, my challenge still stays in place, especially after this fight. If he wants it, he can get it, but he's got to work his way up to me. He's got to go through the ranks just like everybody else. I tried to give him that shot, but his boy Conor lost it for him.
It feels like an opportunity lost for Dylan. Now, we noticed you've been absent from Twitter since October 7th. Man, we know you love your social media. Why is that? Why'd you decide to take a break?
On both Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the whole shebang.
Wow.
I kind of shied away from most of it. Even a lot of media I haven't been doing. just because at the end of the day, what I do is more important to me. You know, like my craft, my skill, being able to work on that. I felt like some things, especially in social media, was starting to be too big of a distraction. You know, I'm keeping my eyes on the prize. I'm the youngest guy in the top 10 for a reason, and I'm going to be around for a long, long time. I'm not one of these guys that's going to get to the top and only stay there for a year and a half, whatever. I'm staying there for a long time, and in order to do that, I have to have my craft underneath me. So that's all I've been focusing on what I do. And when I show up on December 15th, you'll see all the work, and it'll be worth missing a couple tweets.
And how lucky are we, right, that you're appearing on the show, even though you're not doing a whole lot of media, absent from social media? Just wondering, sort of, what were those things that were sort of becoming a big thing on social media? We know that, you know, obviously a lot of Khabib fans, very passionate. Were you getting some strong messages, possibly a couple of threats?
I don't care what anybody got to say. I don't care about, you know, all this, especially those Russian fans. Like I said, they're so short-fused. They're so emotional. I don't let people like that get to me. If anything, being away from social media was more of a personal reason. You know, more things have been coming out in the media, and more attention has been brought to mental health, I think, in the past couple of months. And I think social media actually has a big part to do with that. You know, I think it creates a lot of anxiety in people. And, you know, you can kind of get caught up in it and forget about what you're doing on a regular day-to-day basis. So I felt like it was just a big waste of time. I felt like it was a lot for nothing. And what I do in my craft and getting stronger in what I do is going to get me more money at the end of the day than having a couple Twitter beefs with a couple folks. I'm leaving the Twitter for Al. You know, Al Iaquinta, that's what he want to do. He want to go back and forth with folks on Twitter. He's one of them type. I'm in the gym. I'm working. I don't even want to be bothered with this shit. I'm working on what I do.
And just quickly, before we jump to Al, what did you make of all this commotion around a Khabib-Floyd Mayweather boxing match? I know you know Mayweather pretty well. I know you've been in that gym with him a few times. What did you think of people talking about that?
Listen, I mean, I give Mayweather some props. I do give him some respect if he does end up stepping into a ring or a cage and doing something that the man hasn't done before, and trying to kickbox or do MMA. I will give him some props for that. But I've even talked to Ali about this, Khabib's manager. He trains over at Extreme Couture with me all the time. And I talked about it, and I'm like, man, come on. We you know, let's restore the actual sport itself. You know, at the end of the day, I think we've had enough of these, oh, let's put on a super fight, or, oh, let's make a fight that the fans want to see and all that. Like, it's done. It's over with. I think that time in the sport has passed. I don't even see much intrigue to it. Is anybody really going to watch Khabib and Floyd do anything together? I mean, it's not much intrigue there. So I talked to Ali, and I'm like, come on, what are we doing here? Floyd needs a payday. You know, Floyd spends a lot of money. He needs some more money in his pocket. Let's not give it to him. Let's pay homage to the game and give it to some young guys that are still on their way up.
Kevin Lee, the man of the people. I think you're echoing many people's sentiments, and I think a lot of people agree with that. Okay, so talking about Al Iaquinta, you guys fought at UFC 169. Take us back to that fight, man. What do you remember from that one?
Yeah, I mean, he fought a different person. You know, that was a different person that stepped into that cage that night. That was a college student that took it on 3 weeks' notice just because it was my dream to be in the UFC. I had turned down a lot of other promotions, and you know, that was just kind of the big moment. I didn't really know what I was doing. Wasn't really training like I was supposed to. I've changed everything since that fight. That fight was what made me change and move over to Las Vegas and really start to focus on my training. And he just fought a different kid. You know, he fought a kid that was going out there and just fighting for some Jordans and, you know, kind of trying to look good and, you know, finally fighting for some food in my mouth. And now, you know, I got a house, I got you know, cars and things that I'm trying to do. He's fighting a totally different person. And I think that's what you're going to see on December 15th. I've been dedicated to my craft since that fight. And that's what's going to shine through.
How would you sort of compare your evolution to his evolution? Obviously, you would have been keeping an eye on him. Do you feel like he's made those same leaps and bounds that you'll be fighting a different Al Iaquinta as well?
You know, I think Al's tough. Even if you ask him, you know, his biggest attribute is that he's very, very tough, and he's going to stay in there for as long as he can. And that's what he's done. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. I've had 12 fights. since our fight. He's only had 6. He's taking some time away from the game. You know, he started doing real estate and you know, he's just trying to do it for the money. And, you know, if it's worth it to him, I've really dedicated myself to this. And, you know, I think I've constantly improved and constantly shown new things during fights and shown something new every single fight. And from him, you kind of see the same thing. And I think he even will say the same thing. He's strong. He's tough. He's going to give me a good fight, but he's going to take a beating in front of the world on December 15th. And I think he knows that.
So how do you see this rematch going? Do you imagine it plays out anything like that first fight between you two?
No, I think it's going to be a totally different fight. I think I'm totally different. I think he might be totally different. Our first fight was a great fight. You know, I have a lot of people that still kind of hit me up about that fight. They go back and they watch it and they say how good it was. But I think this one's going to be totally different. You know, you're looking at somebody that's just, you know, if you watch that first fight and then you see my last fight, you just see a totally different body style. You see a totally different person. And I think that's what you're going to see again. I'm going to show something new, something different. Yes, there's a little bit of that redemption factor for me. I don't really like Al. He don't really like me. We come from 2 totally different lifestyles. But I'm using this to send a message to the rest of the world that I'm on a different level. And I'm using it to send a message to Khabib because he already know. But the rest of the world need to know. And I'm going to show when I'm on a different level.
So, well, on that message, I guess your aim here, and obviously fighting super unpredictable, but your aim is to sort of beat him in a more impressive fashion than Khabib was able to beat Al, right?
Yeah, I mean, Al did good versus Khabib. You know, he went the full 5 rounds. He showed some holes that I've been seeing in Khabib's game for a long time, but he's showing some holes to the world that they haven't seen. And, you know, I'm going to make sure I fill up all those holes, and I show that that I'm on a different level than both those guys. So that's my only focus right now.
I mean, this is just a little bit of fun because Al is the next guy, but the division in general is pretty unclear at the moment. You got guys like Dustin Poirier, who's going to be healthy soon. Tony Ferguson is waiting for a potential title shot, but we don't know if he's going to be fighting Khabib. Who are you looking at? You even got a guy like Donald Cerrone who's moving back down to lightweight, and everybody is back on Donald Cerrone's sort of bandwagon. Who's the guy that you'd be looking at potentially next if you do get this marquee win over Al?
Yeah, it's an exciting time in the division. That's why I even said if they open up this 165 division, which I feel like they're going to do, I'm still going to stay at 155. I feel like I got to get this belt first. You know, I'm looking straight to the top. I'm looking at Khabib. You know, people think he's this undefeated and you know, he's just this Russian tank. I've been calling that man out for 2 years now. So we definitely, you know, like I said, I train with his manager. I see him around all the time. They know I'm the biggest threat for him. I just have to do my job in convincing the rest of the world. But that's the only fight that I'm really looking at. He's the biggest challenge, I think. And he gives me the most, he'll really get me up out of the bed, you know? The rest of these guys, Tony is still out there. If I'm being completely honest, he does deserve the next title shot. You know, if they make that fight happen in the beginning of the year, then I'll be waiting for the winner. Either way, as long as Tony or Khabib hold that title, I'll be here at 155 to take it from him. We gotta, me and them, we gotta get it in. You know, before they retire, you know, Khabib's talking about, oh, he just want to fight and then go ahead and retire before he really even fought anybody. I can't let that happen. We gotta get it in. It's inevitable that our paths gonna cross.
I'm just curious. It must be a funny dynamic because if you're friends with Ali and you train with him, but at the same time, you're trying to fight Khabib. What are those conversations like? I know Ali isn't the biggest fan of people talking trash about Khabib. Do you guys ever get in little arguments or training about things that you say on social media? And what kind of stuff does he say to you in terms of you fighting Khabib?
Yeah, I mean, we go back and forth. Ali's fun. He's fun. He's kind of like me a little bit. He gonna speak his mind. He not gonna let you influence him. He kind of marched to his own drum. So it's kind of fun when you get 2 guys that are like that and are both outspoken. At the end of the day, we're both professionals. We both know, you know, we're doing this for bigger than just ourselves. You know, he's got a family. I've got a family that I'm looking after. I respect it. But he knows what I'm doing, and he knows that I'm the real challenge. And I make that very, very, very clear to him every time I see him. I'm going to probably go see him later on today, and we're going to talk some more shit. He keeps me sharp. I will say that. He keeps my shit talking and the whole shebang. He keep it all sharp. It's fun.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the shit talking, but I feel like there's not going to be much this lead up. You said that you're sort of off Twitter, off social media, and you mentioned sort of mental health before. I know that you sort of had a few things that you got over not that long ago. Is it fair to say that this is sort of the best mindset, Kevin Lee, that has been around for a long time going into this fight?
Absolutely, and I think that's what you're going to see during the fight. I think that's what's going to make the big difference is when you go back and you watch our first fight and then you watch this one. Not only will you see physically that I've changed a lot, but you'll see mentally too. I've grown a lot since then. I've grown a lot in the past like 6-7 months, and I think that's what I'm really trying to. I don't necessarily. I just give people the real me. And I think as long as I do that, then people kind of feel it and they resonate with it. And I think, as long as you're steady evolving and as long as you're steady trying to grow, not only is that physically but mentally as well, then people kind of respect it and they see it. And I think that's what you're going to see, and that's what's going to make the big difference.
Is that Dewey Cooper popping up in the background?
It is Dewey. It was his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Dewey. Are you taking him out, Kevin? Are you giving him a present?
Hotel be not working. Be ready, motherfuckers. Be ready.
Yeah, we just got done doing some training, so I figured I'd go ahead and pop on Skype with you guys.
Oh, man. Well, we really appreciate the time, Kevin. Before we let you go, we want to get a quick prediction from you. But I have to say, I think it's really cool how you're staying off social media, because I think a lot of fighters think they have to spend all their time on social media, and it shows you that when there's a great fight, you don't necessarily have to sit on social media all day having to promote it. So cheers to you for doing that and sort of setting that standard. So as we wrap up, a prediction from you, sir. How do you see yourself beating Al in this big rematch?
Well, let me give you one more first, because, to stay on that, just because I do think it's important, I think that we have to keep evolving even the way that we promote fights. And even the way that we kind of do this, everybody, social media has been big for the UFC for a long, long time. But I feel like, there's more ways to get it done. There's more ways to do this than just kind of the same barking at each other all the time. If you do the same things over and over and over again, it gets kind of stale. So I'm just trying to show a little bit of evolution in the game. And, I think that's going to show. And it's going to show when I fight Al, I'm going to humiliate him. I'm going to just show that I'm better than him everywhere. How the fight goes will be up to him. He's a very tough guy. He will stay in there for as long as you let him. But I'll make him quit, and he'll get up out of there. I think I'll put that man to sleep.
All right, well, it's going to be very exciting. Guys, don't forget to follow Kevin on Twitter and Instagram at Motown Phenom. It is about quality, not quantity here. When he does post, it's going to be amazing. UFC on Fox 31 goes down at Milwaukee, December 15th in the US, 16th in Australia. Kevin, we know you're not doing much media now, so we really, really, really appreciate you jumping on the show with us, man. Thank you so much.
Of course, my man. Of course, I appreciate you guys. As always, you guys are good people, so I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll enjoy a vodka at the next party, Kevin. Take care and best of luck.
My man.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Well, with the 25th anniversary of the UFC being celebrated this week, we could think of no better man to get on the program. You know him from his legendary work with the Wrestling Observer newsletter and MMA Fighting. It is a pleasure to welcome Dave Meltzer back to Submission Radio. Dave, it's great to have you back on the program.
Great to be here. Yeah, very interesting week.
It is a very interesting week, and I always love chatting with you. Before we talk about this anniversary, I've got to touch on UFC Denver this past weekend. Sometimes a show just goes the right way. What did you think of the main event between Rodriguez and Korean Zombie, specifically that insane finish?
Oh, I thought it was one of the best matches of the year, and maybe I think it was to me like the most memorable finish of a match that I could recall, which isn't technically UFC, was the Benson Henderson Anthony Pettis Showtime kick in the last seconds of that fight. And this was like the same thing, but even more dramatic, because with Henderson and Pettis I thought was slightly ahead in the fight when he hit the kick, but it was pretty even. Whereas this one, Rodriguez was going to lose the decision without a doubt. I mean, he was losing the split decision. So he literally, I was watching it going like, well, Zombie won, and then boom, he's knocked out. Because you already knew it was 10 seconds to go.
Yeah.
Or less at the time, yeah.
I think one of the crazy things about it as well was not only the fact that it was an unbelievable fight and the fact that this fighters really just sort of gained steam and everybody around the world sort of embraced it. But the fact that this wasn't a pay-per-view, this was just a fight night that's sort of blown up to be kind of one of the biggest fights of the year. What did you make of the exchange of respect as well between Yair and the Korean Zombie? I mean, there's that iconic photo of both of them at the hospital, and they're both sort of shaking hands and smiling in that photo. It's a pretty unremarkable. It's pretty crazy to see an image like that after a fight like that, and the respect between both fighters.
Doesn't it remind you of the Rocky movie with Rocky and
Yes.
Apollo both in the hospital?
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
it's like a
as soon as I saw
movie.
that photo, I go, this is like the Rocky movie. And that fight was, a Rocky movie fight. I mean, it was really, look, you could, you know what I mean? It's like you're doing a movie and you're scripting it like that. It's like, that's ultimate. It was really an incredible, memorable fight, every aspect of it, the fight itself. I mean, I was thinking this is like an awesome fight by round two. It stayed strong. And it was competitive, and then that finish is just like, oh my God! I mean, so yeah. I mean, it came in like a usual Saturday night show, but when it was over, it was like this was like history.
Yeah. I mean, especially the 25th anniversary, you'd in an ideal world want something special to happen, and we got something special. And I remember thinking, like, I would never wish anything bad on any fighter, but in a sick way, thank God Frankie Edgar got injured, right? Because we got to see this amazing moment. I'm just wondering, what do you think this will end up doing numbers-wise? Are you getting any kind of indications?
I already got the number. The number was it was a little over 800,000, which is the best in several months. It did. I mean, as far as for a Saturday night show, it did real well, and this is coming off of a string of shows that didn't do so well. So yeah, it did. Zombie always draws strong. I think that maybe. He's fought so infrequently, but every time he's fought, the number has always been way higher than I would have expected it to be. So he's a television draw for sure.
I mean, we just came off UFC 230, and while it was a good event, it didn't seem like that much of the public was really into it. Do you feel like a fight like this is similar in a lot of ways to like a Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner fight, where it kind of gets a lot of people pumped up about the UFC and gets more people to tune into the next big show that the UFC throw?
I don't think so, because we've had some big ones. We had like Alvarez-Poirier, which I thought was going to do great and didn't do well. And then afterwards, it wasn't like anything like picked up. I don't really think there's a correlation, of having a great fight and then, like a week later people tune in, unless it's like, but even like coming off like the McGregor, the McGregor and Khabib fight. I mean, it was like that was a fantastic show, and so many people saw it, and then the next pay-per-view didn't do well at all. So I don't really think that I don't know. Historically, I haven't seen that really matters.
Also wanted to get your thoughts, Cowboy, just kind of speaking of ratings, he's a guy that I think typically, and you would be the guy with the numbers, so you would know better, but I think typically he is a draw, at least for the hardcore fans. He's going down to lightweight after his win over Mike Perry. If it was up to you, who do you think would make sense at lightweight? I know Cowboy's kind of teasing that the UFC already approached him about an opponent. Didn't tell him when, but they've got a guy that they want him to face. Who do you think would make sense?
I mean, I only see two names, and one's McGregor, and the other's Poirier. I can't really see anybody else. There's other guys, but to me, those aren't big fights. Poirier's a big fight because a win would get him in the championship mix. McGregor's obviously a gigantic fight. And when I look at the McGregor situation, I mean, if you're looking at who to face McGregor next, I mean, if it's not going to be Khabib, and it really shouldn't be, I mean, my choices are GSP, and I don't know what GSP's thoughts are, but if it's not GSP, you got Diaz, and Diaz and UFC aren't really on good terms right now. And then there's really nobody else. I mean, Cerrone trumps everybody else I could come up with. So I could see it being, and that's like, I think that like the buildup of that fight would be awesome because you've got a guy who could talk back to McGregor. I don't think he can hang with McGregor talking, but he'll give it a good try. And it's somebody who is really, really popular. I think that like the dynamic reminds me somewhat of the, with the McGregor-Diaz dynamic, where it's like by the week of the fight, people are going to be hearing those two talk so much that I think it may do like really, really well.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy to see how it goes. Imagine that. Cerrone's kind of a funny guy. When you look back at a guy like Cerrone, I mean, this is not a guy that has been a champion, but he's got into a title shot here and there. How do you sort of view his career and what he's been able to do for the UFC?
That's a really interesting thing because as soon as that fight was over and the people were going crazy and he set the record for most wins and most finishes, and you go like, did he have a Hall of Fame career? And it's like there's a part of me that goes, he's like a star. He's had all these great fights. He's got, the most wins in history and most finishes in history, and win bonuses and all that. Those are real significant records. But at the same time, he's never won a UFC championship. He's never been number one in the world. There are guys who are number one in the world that aren't in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, my gut is that like he's kind of a Hall of Fame guy. When all is said and done, I think he's a Hall of Fame guy.
I think also, like, when you look at the records and the wins that GSP and Anderson Silva racked up, like, a lot of those were entitled defenses, fighting the best of the best. Whereas Cowboy, a lot of those wins, he was sort of climbing back up the ladder. But I think still having those wins, and I feel like he came into the UFC kind of a little bit late. It just shows the kind of longevity.
Because he had a whole career in WEC first.
Yeah,
and yet he's still the winningest fighter in UFC history. So that really tells you something. But it's not. You can't compare him with Demetrius Johnson or GSP or Anderson Silva. Even though he has one more win than GSP and a couple more than Anderson. But still, the fact that he has that record is still an impressive feat of just of longevity, if nothing else.
I think longevity is the main one.
Durability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, we got to talk UFC 1 because it was recently the 25th anniversary. Just take us back there, Dave, to UFC 1. Were you, by any chance, there for that show? Were you there live?
I was not there, but I watched the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
It was, who knew? It was like you watched that, you had no idea what you were going to watch, and then when it was over, it was like you had no idea what you saw. I mean, it was completely different. I mean, we all thought we were going to see a bunch of movie fights, I mean, nobody really knew. I kind of, with a wrestling background, I kind of did think that there would be some takedowns and submissions. At some level, especially with Shamrock and Gracie. So that didn't shock me, but still, I would say, like, overall, the fact the fights were so short, I don't think anyone expected the fights to be so short. I think that people expected, more classic striking rather than, like, the kind of the brutality that was there. And I think the people were just stunned. Everyone was stunned at Royce Gracie. I mean, even though I kind of, like, going in thought, like, well, Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock were going to be the top guys, but still, the ease which he won, I mean, it was really an eye-opener for people, especially for people who didn't understand submissions. It was a real eye-opener. But like even with me with the submissions, it was like I wasn't from wrestling. You learn certain wrestling submissions, but rear naked chokes weren't part of wrestling. So him just going in there and mount and choke and everything like that, just the basic textbook early jiu-jitsu was stuff that unless you were a jiu-jitsu guy, which I wasn't, and very very few people were at the time. It was just like, wow, that was effective and easy and unbelievable.
Absolutely. Can you take us back in time and sort of give us an idea of what it was like initially covering some of the early UFCs from sort of a coverage perspective for you?
Well, it was just every show was changing. You didn't really know anything. By UFC 3, even 2, when Royce won again, you start to figure certain things out, but then it evolved. I mean, obviously it's more of a striking sport now than it was then. Every show was a learning experience. Every show was unpredictable. At first we thought nobody could beat the Gracies, and then, the technique evolved. I remember somebody telling me that, like, if you this is early on, going like, if you can see the future, it's going to be guys who learn how to block takedowns and are good strikers that are going to start to dominate, as opposed to all, just the idea that wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys are always going to win. And I thought, like, really, and obviously that ended up being the case. So, it was like, it was an evolving sport. I mean, the Maurice Smith championship win was, a real big change in a lot of ways. And then as we went a couple of years later and we started seeing the all-around fighters as opposed to the single-discipline fighters, that changed the sport a lot.
And it's funny, like, back then you had all these insane characters, people cutting promos beforehand. It was almost mandatory. Do you remember, like, a crazy moment from you doing an interview or covering an event live that you can sort of share with us that stands out with you or to you?
I don't know. Just like everything that revolved around the shows that Tank Abbott was on was insane.
Yeah.
It's like we didn't know if there was going to be street fights in the hotel. And there were, or there's always a tense moment. I remember being like at an after party sitting with Dan Severin and he just sort of got this look on his face because Tank Abbott was kind of going crazy of like, and I was like, oh, we don't need a fight here. And
what was he doing by going crazy? What was he doing?
I don't remember. Just causing like a scene and everything. And Severin was kind of like not really happy with the Dan was like a real professional guy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very unprofessional, thuggish stuff in the early UFCs. With just and like between that and the Lions Den. I mean, the Lions Den and Abbott's crew. I always thought that there was going to be like a big showdown at some point because there was that real tension between the sides, and I guess there really was in Detroit with Frank Shamrock and Big Al. I didn't see it, but I guess there was that restaurant fight, and and I think that Pat Miletich and Tank. I don't think they didn't get up into a fight, but there was a situation. There was those time when Tank Abbott went after Alan Goes in the audience, and I think it was in Puerto Rico. So yeah, there was an air of unpredictability. I mean, it was definitely so different from now. It's much better now, I have to say.
Do you remember when it was the first time that you met Dana White, and what were your thoughts of him when you first met him? Did you think this was a guy that could take the sport to where it is today?
Oh man, so I first met him probably the first show after he took over. That he introduced himself to me, and he's a very, very different person. He was very quiet and nice, and the evolution of Dana White's an interesting story too. I mean, he was very enthusiastic. He always was, things are going good, even when it appeared they weren't going good. And even when like there were rumors that they were going to have to sell or the thing was going to go down, Dana was always, pumping you up that like, oh, everything's fine. We've got, Lorenzo's behind it and we're ready to turn it around. And they did spend a lot of money early on. I mean, he was always a good cheerleader for that. And then, things happened. It was really the Ultimate Fighter show and everything like that. And getting on television and then, Dana turned into this incredible fight promoter, and you can't take that away from him.
What do you think about him and I guess being the character that he is today? He's obviously, in a lot of ways, a bigger name than a lot of the fighters, and people always sort of go back and forth of whether, it's a bit too much, whether it helps the sport, whether it's a detriment. Where do you sort of stand on that whole thing? Because you're right, it is a fascinating evolution of when he came and just started in the sport to where he is now.
I go back and forth on that too. I mean, there's no doubt in the early years that Dana's ability to hype a fight was a real key in some of these fights really getting over. Sometimes I think that when you're a media person, he's a big celebrity. Sometimes you kind of feel like he's full of it too much, and so that's a negative. Sometimes, with the decisions, especially like in the last year, you kind of, but that's not all him, although, it's partially him. You kind of get frustrated with a lot of things. Sometimes, you want it to be more sport than it is. There's ups and downs. It's a obviously WME, IMG thought he was like critical because they gave him this incredible offer to stay. I don't think he's as emotionally involved in it as he was during the Fertitta days. And again, it's a different business. I mean, before it was like they were living and dying based on every show. They had to do well. There was a need. Now you can coast. There's so many shows you have to coast. There's a show every week. When it was like 8 shows a year, a bad show put you back. Now, a bad show is people remember it for a week. Then next week you got a new show. And the bad side is like when we have a fight like Yair and Zombie, is that like, for a couple of days we're going to talk about it, but next Saturday we got a whole new show.
Yeah.
And then that, so it's not like with Griffin and Bonner where we talked about that fight for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it became legendary. It's like now the shelf life of every fight is so short, and it's harder to become a star because there's so many shows.
If you had to sort of look back and see the point where you were at a show or covering a show and you thought, all right, this actually has a chance of surviving, because we know even before Dana White, the UFC had a tough time, with states banning them and sort of being relegated and ratings dropping. When was the first time you thought, all right, this could be something that would be on a Fox Sports or an ESPN one day and be a major sport in its own right?
Well, that's two different questions. I thought at UFC 3, after UFC 3, that this had the chance to be like a real big thing, but not at the level that it became. I mean, as far as the first year on Fox, when you had the the build up to Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock, and Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture, and those type of fights. The first year on Fox, on Spike, I thought that it was going to be really popular. Especially like the, it'd be really, it's going to be really, really popular. But I mean, as far as, by that point, you could see just with the ratings that it was going to be valuable to somebody. I didn't know if ESPN would take it. I didn't know if Fox would take it. But the last year or two on Spike, you kind of knew that it was going to outgrow Spike. It was just the nature of everything. I mean, as far as it was like different evolutions. I think 2005, the Royce Gracie Matt Hughes fight, I thought was a real big one. It just felt like there was, the level of interest in that fight just like really picked up, and then you followed right away with Ken Shamrock and Tito Ortiz, and it was like at that period. So this is, it just felt like this thing's just catching fire. I mean, from one year, I went from thinking it will never. It's 25 years before it catches boxing to it catching boxing like a year later.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's interesting sort of seeing the waves, the ups and downs. Like, obviously, it's such a, I guess you could say, seasonal sport. It is dependent on the marquee stars. There was that golden age around, I want to say around 2010, where you had Pride fighters, you had Strikeforce fighters. Well, not that Pride was around, but people were still saying, Pride never dies, Strikeforce came over. Do you think there could be another golden age for the UFC anytime soon? I know these things are very hard to predict.
It's all star driven. If you get 3 Conor McGregors, which probably, again, that may never happen, but it may happen. You get 3 Conor McGregors at the same time, it'll be bigger than ever. If you have none, it'll be a solid sport at the level that it's kind of at. I mean, it's completely star driven, and it's not like UFC getting hot. It's going to be fighters getting hot. UFC is just UFC. It'll be at a certain level, whatever it is. It's probably declining in popularity in a lot of ways, but the big fight, if you have it's like the history of boxing. Boxing during Muhammad Ali's era was gigantic. During Mike Tyson's era, it was gigantic. You had Floyd and Manny Pacquiao setting records. So it's going to be the exact same thing. It's going to be based on big fights, and in between big fights, it's just going to be kind of a sport that's there on television every week, but not like the NBA or like a major sport.
Well, it's interesting because right now the UFC is going through some interesting changes, and one of these is the rumors around the flyweight division potentially being dissolved. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Dave, what would you think if the UFC did get rid of the flyweights? Do you think this is a mistake?
I can see why they're doing it.
Can you sort of explain to a lot of fans who may not understand the reasoning behind it as to why the UFC would have a reason to do it?
Business-wise, the flyweights just aren't really big. I mean, as a sport, I don't like them getting rid of it. I think that it's a good skill division. I really hated, them losing Demetrius because he's, he was such a great fighter and he was still in his prime, and he only lost once in that division. And I just thought that there was like a legacy of, it's like a career when you look back that to me is going to be unfulfilled because he'll go to one and even if he wins his next 10 fights, the questions they weren't in UFC and it won't be in the spotlight that UFC was in. And how do you compare it to one of those guys in UFC facing tougher competition and everything? And I just thought like Demetrius was having a record-setting career that was changed. I mean, look, there's no women featherweights. There's a lot of good, men, flyweights. So you look at it that way and go like, why did they pick that division? Why did they add women's flyweight, which, really doesn't have, and I mean, it's like yeah, they're gonna have a decent championship match, but there's far more stars and better fighters in men's flyweight. There are a lot of those guys are good fighters and they have good fights. So, I wasn't happy, but I can't say it was a bad move either. For whatever reason, it was tough for those guys to get over, and maybe one of the problems was that Demetrius never really had a great rival to I think every great fighter needs that rival, like John Jones had with Cormier, you know, or you know, like that type of thing. And the other thing too is, I think that there was always the time of like whoever the bantamweight champion was, whether it was Cruz, whether it was Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt, where the idea of them fighting Demetrius would have been a great fight, and Demetrius wasn't really up for that. And I thought that, like, you know, for his legacy, you know, that's the kind of fight he needed, just, you know, to make him even more larger than life. And he seemed content to, like, set this record and beat guys that he knew he could beat, rather than challenge himself with guys that he maybe didn't know he could beat. And I think that, you know, that may have in the long run hurt the division, because if Demetrius had beaten like the bantamweight champion, then moved back to flyweight, I just don't think that they would have been able to curtail the division at that point.
It's interesting how a possible solution to keeping the division would have been to have the flyweight champion fight in outside division, essentially. With, I guess, TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo, what do you think happens if Henry Cejudo were to beat TJ Dillashaw? And I understand why most people would favor TJ here, but if he beats him, do you think they basically kill the division anyway, and they just have Henry Cejudo move up to bantamweight and do an immediate rematch?
Yeah, and then you have to do a rematch so it's like, what did you accomplish?
Yeah,
you know, I think the idea is that Dillashaw wins and then vacates the title, and then the division's gone. But I think that you know, again, it's a fight. Cejudo could win, but I think that's probably why they made it. You know, I didn't understand why they made it for the flyweight championship, other than that very reason. And it's kind of like he wins, vacates it, and now it's gone. Well, you know,
now he's the double champ.
Yeah.
Crazy times. Well, Dave, before we let you go, we just want to quickly get some news around Brock Lesnar from you. We know you're in the know when it comes to what's going on with Brock. So we know he's got this new contract with the WWE. From your perspective, what does this contract do in regards to his UFC return? Would he be able to return to this proposed possible March card and fight Daniel Cormier?
I mean, his contract allows him to do that. The timing is interesting.
Right before WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, it's 5 weeks before WrestleMania, and obviously WrestleMania, I don't know what the role is, but he's definitely booked on WrestleMania. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that him signing the new WWE contract lowers the chance of him going back, but you know, I think it lowers the chance of it, but you know, it's not out of the water. It's not like anyone said no, he's not going to do it. But I look at the timing, and you know, it becomes tough and it becomes a risk. You know, what if he goes and he has a big WrestleMania match and he goes and fights and gets a concussion? I mean, you know, stuff happens in wrestling. He'd get a concussion in wrestling as well, but that's a big risk. So I don't know. He didn't go to the New York show to confront Cormier. I saw
was he supposed to go at any point to that show, from your knowledge?
It was always up in the air. It was never like supposed to. I mean, Dana White talked about it. Cormier talked about it. From what I understand from the Lesnar side, it was considered until the very last minute, but he didn't go. So him not going, to me, I don't know what that means.
Was there any truth to potentially the commission not wanting that to happen? We heard rumors that apparently the commission, after what happened at 223, just said no one's getting in there.
I mean, from Lesnar's side, I certainly never heard that, and I had heard stuff from that side. You know, like literally the day before or a couple days before the Saudi fight. You know, asking if he's going to go to New York, and it was just like he's going to make the call himself, and it was going to be a call. You know, so I think that I don't believe that story to be true.
From your perspective, let's say he can't do much because WrestleMania is a massive event for the WWE. Do you see DC fighting John Jones and then potentially sticking around to fight Brock Lesnar? Or do you think DC fights possibly John Jones, retires, and then Brock Lesnar finds himself against a new opponent in the UFC?
That's up to DC. I don't know. You know, a lot would depend on what happened with DC and John Jones, which I would figure would be the fight that they would do on March 2nd. Feels early if John Jones is fighting December 29th. So I think that DC, you know, that would be tough. DC may end up fighting Stipe Miocic at that point.
That would be interesting, because I feel like DC. Yeah, I mean, I guess if he has to fight anyone and he has to have one more fight, and Stipe is the only guy, I mean, I guess, but he seems so lukewarm on that one.
I think DC would be disappointed if it's Stipe, only because business-wise, he'll make a ton of money against Lesnar. He'll make a ton of money against Jones. He won't make a ton of money against Stipe. So I think he's looking for so that may lead him to go. But if he loses to Stipe, he may just postpone the fight and just wait, maybe wait until May if Lesnar wants to fight in May. Because I think at the end of the day, he doesn't have to retire on his birthday. I mean, that's just something that he said. But I think he would want the Lesnar fight just for the financial aspect of it for his career. Whereas the Stipe fight, I think that there's a competitive part of him that would like that fight, but it's clearly the number 3 choice because the Jones fight. I mean, he doesn't have to avenge anything with Stipe. He's like putting it all on the line. There's no great reward. He already beat Stipe. Whereas with John Jones, if nothing else, it's kind of like the end of a story. There is a story. There is, even though he lost twice to John Jones, he's now a double champion. Which he wasn't before, and that becomes one of the great fights in history. And it's again, it's a story we've seen play out for years and years and years. And we know it would be the end. We know it would be the last fight. We know DC's been on a roll as a fighter. So there's, to me, a lot of interest in that. And again, until we see DC, I mean, here's the other thing. What if Gustafsson beat Jones? And I believe that's a possibility.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of interesting possibilities there. And then if this John Jones DC rematch does happen, DC wants to do it at light heavyweight. But I feel like the fans really want to see this thing go down at heavyweight to see what kind of advantages DC has there. So that kind of brings a new wrinkle to that fight. So very fascinating. But guys, make sure to follow Dave on Twitter at Dave Meltzer, WON, of course, one of the OGs in the game. Dave, it's a massive pleasure to have you on the show normally, but I think during this week when we're celebrating the UFC anniversary, looking back on all the amazing work that you've done, it's an extra big pleasure for us to have you on the show this week. So thank you so much for coming on. It's always so much fun chatting to you.
Okay, thanks very much.
And there he is, the man himself, Dave Meltzer, an OG in the MMA game and an OG in Submission Radio and our hearts. We would speak to Dave Meltzer even back in the day when we were on radio, before we were doing Submission Radio, the MMA show today. We were talking to him around 2006 about pro wrestling. So 12 years, I think technically, is our relationship with Dave Meltzer. So, a lot. I'm not saying it's the anniversary, but, a lot of anniversaries flying around. 25 for the UFC, 12 for, us and Dave Meltzer. I'm just saying it's a big deal, and we love having him on. Also love having the rest of our sexy guests on this week. Kevin Lee, Mike Perry, Coach Wink. A massive thank you to them. I think it was a good show. I think it was some fun interviews. I think we got some great insight from everybody, from Kevin Lee, from Coach Wink, from Mike Perry, from Dave Meltzer. Smooth interviews, some pipe bombs dropped. I dug it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. What did you think, Dennis?
Absolutely. No, a lot of fun. I'm happy that we were able to come back on this week of all weeks, 25-year anniversary. Just crazy to think about everything that's happened. I mean, just 3 years ago, Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey here in Melbourne at Etihad Stadium, now called the Marvel Stadium. So just so much history to look through, and an amazing week to do it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Another episode of Submission Radio coming at you next week. And with that, be safe and thanks for tuning in.